Stop for a second. Not metaphorically. Actually stop. Put everything else aside for a moment and think about this. You are going to die. Not today, hopefully. Not soon if things go well. But at some point, guaranteed, inevitable, non-negotiable, your heart will stop. Your brain will go dark. And everything that is you, your memories, your personality, your loves, your fears, your sense of humor, your awareness of this exact moment, all of it will. What exactly? That's the question, isn't it? The one that humans have been asking since the moment we were capable of asking questions. The one that religions were built to answer. The one that philosophy has wrestled with for thousands of years. The one that most of us push to the back of our minds because it's too big, too frightening, too final to sit with for long. But here's what's changed recently. Science is starting to take this question seriously. Not the philosophy of it, not the spirituality of it, the actual, empirical, data-driven question of what happens to a human being when they die. And what scientists are finding is stranger, more unsettling, and in some ways more hopeful than anyone expected. In this video, we're going to go through all of it. We'll look at what actually happens in your brain in the moments after death, and why the answer surprised even the researchers who found it. We'll examine the thousands of documented near-death experiences and ask why people across cultures and continents keep reporting the same things. We'll dive into quantum physics and ask whether consciousness, the thing that makes you you, can actually be destroyed. We'll look at the cases of children who remember previous lives in verifiable detail. And we'll sit with the most radical theories from physicists and biologists who think the relationship between consciousness and death is nothing like what we were taught. By the end of this video, you may not have all the answers. Nobody does. But you'll never think about this question the same way again. Let's go. Here's something that might surprise you. The serious scientific study of what happens after death is extremely recent. We're talking decades, not centuries. And the reason for that is not scientific, it's cultural. For most of modern science's history, the question of what happens after death was considered off-limits. Not because it wasn't interesting, obviously it is, but because it was seen as belonging to religion, to philosophy, to the realm of the unprovable. Any scientist who expressed serious interest in near-death experiences, in consciousness surviving death, in anything that smelled remotely like an afterlife, risked being dismissed as a crank. Career suicide, you might say. So the question was left to priests and philosophers, while scientists looked away. That started to change in the 1970s, when psychiatrist Raymond Moody published a book called Life After Life, documenting the experiences of people who had been clinically dead and revived. Moody wasn't claiming proof of an afterlife, he was a scientist and he was careful about that. He was simply documenting a pattern, a strikingly consistent set of experiences reported by people across different ages, backgrounds, and cultures, all of whom had been to the edge of death and come back. The medical establishment mostly ignored it, but the data kept accumulating. Cardiologists started noticing that patients who were resuscitated after cardiac arrest often reported experiences during the period when, by all physiological measures, they should have been experiencing nothing at all. Neuroscientists started studying brain activity at the moment of death. Psychologists started systematically interviewing near-death experiencers. And what they found forced them to take the question seriously, whether they wanted to or not. Before we can talk about what happens after death, we need to establish what death actually is. And this turns out to be more complicated than you'd think. For most of human history, death meant your heart stopped and you stopped breathing. Simple, irreversible, final. Then we invented resuscitation. CPR, defibrillators, advanced cardiac life support. Suddenly, people whose hearts had stopped could be brought back. Cardiac death became reversible, at least sometimes, and the definition of death had to change. Now we use brain death as the legal and medical standard in most countries. You are dead when your entire brain, including the brainstem, has permanently ceased all activity. No blood flow, no electrical activity, no reflexes, nothing. But even this definition is being challenged, because we are discovering that the boundary between life and death is not a sharp line. It's a process. Cells don't die simultaneously. Different parts of the brain shut down at different rates. Some cellular processes continue for hours after the heart stops. And crucially, as we'll see in the next section, Some brain activity actually increases in the moments after cardiac arrest, before declining into silence. Death is not an event. It's a transition. And what happens during that transition is one of the most fascinating and least understood processes in all of biology. Here's something that will make you uncomfortable. People have been declared dead and come back. Not just in the movies, in hospitals, documented, verified. The record for the longest cardiac arrest with full neurological recovery is disputed, but there are documented cases of people surviving after more than an hour of cardiac arrest under specific conditions, usually involving hypothermia, which slows metabolic processes and extends the window of potential recovery. In 2020, a study published in a major medical journal documented cases of patients showing signs of consciousness, eye movement, following commands, after life support was withdrawn. Patients who should, by all medical definitions, have been in the process of dying. The AWARE study, conducted by Dr. Sam Parnia at Southampton University, specifically investigated whether patients having near-death experiences could perceive things in the room during cardiac arrest. One patient accurately described the specific equipment used during resuscitation and the positions of medical staff, details they could not have seen from their position on the table and could not have known beforehand. One case, verified, unexplained. The line between life and death is real, but it is thinner, more permeable, and more mysterious than medicine has traditionally acknowledged. And what happens in that thin space, in the territory between the last heartbeat and the final silence, is where the most interesting science is happening right now. This is the finding that genuinely shocked the neuroscience community. And it's important enough that we need to spend some time with it. In 2023, researchers at the University of Michigan published a study that measured brain activity in dying patients, people whose life support was being withdrawn after catastrophic brain injury. These were patients whose conditions were irreversible. They were going to die. The researchers measured their brain waves continuously through the process. What they found was extraordinary. In 2 of the 4 patients studied, at the moment the ventilator was removed and oxygen stopped flowing to the brain, there was a massive surge of brain activity. Specifically, a surge in gamma waves, the highest frequency brain waves, associated with conscious perception, attention, and what neuroscientists call binding, the process by which the brain integrates information from different regions into a unified conscious experience. These surges were not small blips. They were larger than anything recorded during normal waking consciousness. The dying brain was, for a brief period, more active than it had ever been during life. This wasn't the first time something like this had been observed. A 2013 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences measured brain activity in rats at the moment of cardiac arrest and found the same thing. A surge of highly organized, conscious-like brain activity in the seconds after the heart stopped. What does this mean? The honest answer is, we don't fully know. One interpretation is purely physiological. As oxygen deprivation stresses the brain, inhibitory neurons fail first, releasing a storm of excitatory activity before everything collapses. A last gasp of electrical noise, signifying nothing. But another interpretation, and this is where it gets interesting, is that this surge of gamma activity is the neural correlate of the near-death experience. That the tunnel, the light, the life review, the sense of profound peace that thousands of people report, all of that might be happening in this window. In this brief explosion of consciousness at the moment of death. If that's true, then dying might not be the blank nothingness most people imagine. It might be, paradoxically, one of the most intense experiences of your life. Let's walk through what we currently know about the neuroscience of dying, step by step. The moment your heart stops, blood flow to the brain ceases almost immediately. Without oxygen, neurons begin to fail within seconds. The brainstem, the most ancient part of the brain controlling basic functions, is the last to go. The cortex, where your sense of self and conscious awareness live, starts shutting down faster. In the first few seconds, blood pressure in the brain drops rapidly. Neurons depolarize, they fire uncontrollably as their carefully maintained chemical gradients collapse. This mass firing is the surge we just discussed. Within about 20 seconds, most measurable electrical activity in the cortex goes flat. This is the point at which someone would be declared clinically dead by most EEG criteria. But here's what's interesting. Flat EEG does not mean no activity. The instruments we use have limits. Activity below a certain threshold, or activity that is organized differently than normal waking consciousness, might not register. Some researchers believe that consciousness might continue in some form even when standard measurements show nothing. Think about that carefully. We're declaring death based on our instrument's inability to detect activity. That is not the same as proving that no activity exists. Our instruments for measuring consciousness are crude. We can measure electrical activity, blood flow, chemistry. We cannot measure because we don't even know what to measure, whether experience continues in some form that doesn't require the specific neural signatures we know how to detect. We might be declaring death at the limit of our measurement capability, not at the actual limit of consciousness. This is the question that divides neuroscientists into two camps, and neither camp has a definitive answer. Camp 1. The dying brain is generating experiences. The tunnel, the light, the life review, all of it is the product of a brain under extreme physiological stress. Oxygen deprivation triggers hallucinations. The release of endogenous chemicals mimics psychedelic states. The sense of peace and unity is the result of specific brain regions activating as others shut down. It's all inside the skull. There's nothing beyond it. This is the mainstream scientific position. It's coherent, it's consistent with what we know about brain function, and it explains most of what we observe. Camp 2. The dying brain is not generating the experience. It's receiving or transmitting it. In this view, consciousness is not produced by the brain but filtered or expressed through it. The brain is not the source of awareness. It's the antenna. And when the antenna breaks down, the signal doesn't disappear. It just stops being broadcast through that particular channel. This is a minority scientific position, but it's held by serious researchers. The evidence they point to includes the verified perceptions during cardiac arrest, patients accurately reporting things they couldn't have seen or known. The consistency of near-death experiences across cultures, ages, and belief systems. The cases of enhanced cognitive clarity during states of profound brain impairment. And here is the crucial point. Neither camp has proven their case. The mainstream position assumes that consciousness is produced by the brain, but that assumption has never been proven. The hard problem of consciousness, why physical processes produce subjective experience at all, remains completely unsolved. We don't know what consciousness is, which means we don't know whether it can exist independently of the brain, and which means we don't know what happens to it when the brain dies. Anyone who tells you they're certain about this is not being honest with you. Here's a number that should stop you. Over 17 million Americans alone report having had a near-death experience. Global estimates put the number in the hundreds of millions. These are people who were clinically dead or close to it and came back with memories of what happened during that time. And here's what's strange. They keep reporting the same things. Across cultures, across centuries, across belief systems. A Christian in Alabama, a Buddhist in Japan, an atheist in Germany, a child who has never been taught religious concepts. They all come back describing experiences with striking similarities. The classic elements. A sense of leaving the body and looking down at it from above. Moving through a dark tunnel toward an intense, warm light. A feeling of absolute peace. Not just the absence of pain, but a profound, overwhelming sense of being completely safe and completely loved. Encountering deceased relatives or friends. A life review, seeing the major events of one's life, often with a sense of understanding their meaning. Reaching a boundary or threshold that, if crossed, means no return. And then coming back. Not everyone reports all of these elements, but the overlap is extraordinary. The consistency cannot be explained by cultural contamination. Many of these accounts, particularly from non-Western cultures, describe the same core elements without exposure to Western near-death experience literature. The most straightforward explanation, from a purely scientific standpoint, is that these experiences reflect actual perceptions of something real, that the dying brain is not generating random hallucinations but is genuinely experiencing something structured and consistent. What that something is remains the question. Now we get to the cases that are hardest to explain away. The challenge with near-death experiences is that the skeptic's argument is always available. These are hallucinations produced by a stressed brain. The experiences feel real and profound, but they're internally generated. There's no way to verify them against external reality. Except sometimes there is. A significant subset of near-death experiencers report having observed their own resuscitation from outside their bodies. They describe looking down at the scene from above. They report specific details: what equipment was used, what medical staff said, what was happening in the room at specific moments. Details that they could not have known from their position, unconscious, eyes closed on an operating table. And some of those details have been verified. Dr. Pim van Lommel, a Dutch cardiologist who conducted one of the largest prospective studies of near-death experiences, documented a case of a man who had his dentures removed during resuscitation. The nurse who removed them placed them in a specific drawer. When the patient woke up, he accurately described the nurse, described what she had done with his dentures, and described other specific details of the room, despite having been in a deep coma throughout. In the AWARE study, a patient correctly identified a specific object placed on a high shelf specifically so that it could only be seen from above, from the position where out-of-body experiencers report floating. The object was seen. The details were reported accurately. One case is not proof. 10 cases are not proof. But the pattern of verified perceptions during clinical death is a data point that demands explanation, and hallucination doesn't fully cover it, because hallucinations don't produce accurate, verifiable information about the external world. Let's be fair to the skeptical position, because it deserves a serious hearing. The leading scientific explanations for near-death experiences include oxygen deprivation causing hallucinations, similar to the experiences reported by fighter pilots under high G-forces. The release of endogenous DMT, a powerful psychedelic compound that the brain may produce under extreme stress, which can cause experiences of tunnels, lights, and encounters with entities. REM intrusion, the brain entering a dreamlike state during the transition to death. And expectation effects, people experiencing what they expect to experience, shaped by cultural conditioning. These are real mechanisms. They're not dismissible. Oxygen deprivation does cause hallucinations. DMT does produce profound altered states. REM intrusion is a documented phenomenon. But here's where the explanations run into trouble. They don't account for the verified perceptions. Hallucinations don't produce accurate information about the external world. If the experience is entirely internally generated, how does a patient accurately describe the specific drawer a nurse put their dentures in? They don't account for the consistency. If these are random stress-induced hallucinations, why do people across vastly different cultures and belief systems report the same structured sequence of experiences? And they don't account for the congenitally blind. People who have been blind from birth, who have never had a visual experience, who have no concept of what sight feels like, sometimes report visual near-death experiences. Seeing the operating room, seeing their body, seeing the light. If these experiences are generated by a visual cortex under stress, how do people with no functional visual cortex have them? The mainstream explanations are partial. They explain some things and leave others completely untouched. And in science, a partial explanation is not a complete one. Here's where we get into territory that is genuinely controversial, not fringe, but debated at the highest levels of physics and neuroscience. Roger Penrose is one of the most respected mathematical physicists alive. He won the Nobel Prize in 2020 for his work on black holes. He is not a crank, and he believes that consciousness cannot be explained by classical neuroscience. His argument, developed with anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, is called orchestrated objective reduction, orchestroar. The basic idea is this: consciousness arises from quantum processes in structures called microtubules, which are found inside neurons. These microtubules are not just structural scaffolding, they are, according to Penrose and Hameroff, quantum computational devices. They process information at the quantum level, and the collapse of quantum superpositions within them gives rise to moments of conscious experience. This is controversial because most neuroscientists believe the brain is too warm and wet for quantum effects to play any significant role. Quantum coherence, the delicate quantum states required for quantum computation, is extremely fragile and collapses almost instantly in warm biological environments. The brain, the skeptics say, is not a quantum computer. Penrose and Hameroff disagree. and recent experimental evidence has found quantum effects in biological systems previously thought too warm for them, including photosynthesis, bird navigation, and enzyme function. The idea that biology is entirely classical is looking shakier than it used to. Why does this matter for death? Because if consciousness is quantum information, if your awareness, your sense of self, your experience of this moment is a pattern of quantum states in microtubules, then what happens to that information when you die has a specific answer from physics. This is one of the most fundamental principles in quantum physics, and it has profound implications for the question we're asking. The no-hiding theorem and the principle of unitarity in quantum mechanics together establish that quantum information is conserved. It can be scrambled, redistributed, transformed, but it cannot be created from nothing, and it cannot be destroyed. This is not a philosophical preference. It is a mathematical consequence of the equations that describe reality at its most fundamental level. Stephen Hawking famously challenged this principle with his black hole information paradox, proposing that information falling into a black hole might be permanently lost. It took decades of theoretical work, but the current consensus is that Hawking was wrong. Even black holes don't destroy information. It escapes, encoded in the radiation the black hole emits as it evaporates. Now apply that to consciousness if consciousness is quantum information. If the quantum states in your microtubules constitute your conscious experience, and if quantum information cannot be destroyed, then what happens when your brain dies is not that your consciousness disappears. It's that the quantum information that constituted your consciousness disperses into the universe. It becomes part of the quantum state of everything, entangled with the environment, scrambled beyond any practical recovery, but not gone. You don't end. You dissolve. Whether that dissolution constitutes any form of continued experience, whether there is something it is like to be quantum information dispersed through the universe, is a question that physics cannot currently answer. But the strict destruction of the information that was you? According to our best physical theories, that doesn't happen. Think about that for a moment. Really think about it. Now let's talk about an idea that is even more radical, and that comes not from a physicist but from a biologist. Robert Lanza is a stem cell researcher and one of the most cited scientists in the world. In 2007, he proposed a theory he called biocentrism, developed further with astronomer Bob Berman. The central claim is this: consciousness is not produced by the universe. The universe is produced by consciousness. This sounds like mysticism. It's not, or at least Lanza argues it isn't. The argument is grounded in the same quantum mechanical observations we've already discussed. The double-slit experiment shows that reality behaves differently when observed. The measurement problem in quantum mechanics, the fact that observation collapses the wave function, suggests that the act of conscious observation is not a passive recording of reality but an active participation in creating it. Lanza takes this seriously and runs it to its logical conclusion. Without a conscious observer, there is no definite reality. Space, time, matter, these are not the fundamental fabric of existence. They are constructs of consciousness, tools that biological observers use to navigate experience. The universe doesn't exist independently and then produce consciousness as a byproduct. Consciousness is the ground state, and the universe is what it experiences. If Lanza is right, and this is a big if, then death changes its meaning entirely. Because if consciousness is fundamental and the universe is its product, consciousness cannot end when the brain dies any more than a dream can end because one of the characters in it falls asleep. The brain is a structure within consciousness, not the other way around. When the brain fails, the consciousness that was using it doesn't disappear. It moves on, changes channels, continues in a form we can't predict from inside this particular experience. This is not proven. Lanza's theory is controversial and has serious critics. But it is a coherent scientific argument, made by a serious scientist, that points toward a very specific answer to our question. Death is not the end of consciousness. It might be the end of this particular experience of consciousness, but not consciousness itself. The University of Virginia is one of the most respected research universities in the United States. It has a medical school, a law school, a business school. It is not an institution associated with paranormal research or fringe science, and it has been systematically documenting cases of children who claim to remember previous lives since 1961. The research was started by psychiatrist Ian Stevenson, who spent 40 years collecting and investigating what he called cases of the reincarnation type. He was followed by Jim Tucker, a child psychiatrist who continues the work today. Their database now contains over 2,500 cases from around the world. These are not cases of adults under hypnosis claiming to remember past lives, a phenomenon that is easily explained by suggestibility and confabulation. These are young children, typically between the ages of 2 and 5, who spontaneously begin speaking about a previous life. They give specific details: names, locations, family members, how they died. And in a significant number of cases, those details have been verified. The children typically stop talking about the previous life around age 7 or 8, roughly when language and memory systems fully mature. They often have birthmarks or birth defects corresponding to the wounds that killed the person they claim to have been. They sometimes recognize people and places from the previous life that they have never encountered in their current life. Stevenson and Tucker are careful scientists. They document, they investigate, they look for alternative explanations. They acknowledge that fraud, coincidence, and normal memory processes could explain some cases. But they argue that a significant subset of cases, particularly those with verified specific details and no possibility of prior exposure to the information, resist conventional explanation. Let's look at some specific cases, because the abstract claim becomes much more powerful when you see the details. James Leininger was born in 1998 in Louisiana. At age 2, he began having horrific nightmares about a plane crash. He started drawing pictures of aircraft and labeling them with technical terms no 2-year-old should know. He told his parents that he had been a pilot who died when his plane was shot down, that his name was James, that he flew off a ship called Natoma, and that he had a friend named Jack Larson. His parents investigated. The USS Natoma Bay was a real World War II aircraft carrier. A pilot named James Houston Jr. was killed when his plane was shot down, in exactly the circumstances the child described. Jack Larson was a real person, a surviving veteran, who confirmed details of the death that had never been made public. Ryan Hammonds was a child in Oklahoma who began describing a previous life in Hollywood. He described specific scenes from movies, a house with a swimming pool, working as an agent. His mother took him to a library and asked him to identify people in old Hollywood photographs. Ryan pointed to one man, an extra in a 1932 film, and said that was him. Researchers identified the man as Marty Martin, a bit-part actor turned talent agent who had died in 1964. Details Ryan had given about the man's life, including specifics about his family and career that were not publicly available, were subsequently verified. These cases are not proof of reincarnation. They are data points that don't fit neatly into any conventional explanation. Children knowing specific, verified, non-public details about deceased individuals they have never had contact with. This requires an explanation. And coincidence becomes less convincing the more specific and verified the details are. Let's be honest about what these cases do and don't establish. What they establish: something is happening that conventional science doesn't have a clean explanation for. Children are accurately reporting specific, verifiable information about deceased individuals in ways that rule out, in the best documented cases, fraud, coincidence, and prior exposure to the information. This is a real phenomenon that deserves serious scientific attention. What they don't establish: a mechanism. Even if we accept that some children genuinely have memories of previous lives, we don't know how. Is it reincarnation in the traditional sense? A soul moving from one body to another? Is it some form of quantum information transfer? Is it access to some kind of collective memory or field that we don't understand? Is it something else entirely that doesn't map onto any existing concept? Tucker himself is careful about this. He says the data supports the hypothesis that consciousness survives death and can be reborn in a new body. But he acknowledges that this hypothesis requires mechanisms we can't currently explain. What the cases do is push the question. They add to the pile of evidence, alongside near-death experiences, alongside the quantum physics of information, alongside the death surge in brain activity, that something about consciousness is more mysterious and more persistent than the conventional model allows. And the conventional model, to be clear, has not explained any of this. It has dismissed it. That's not the same thing. In 1907, A Massachusetts physician named Duncan McDougall had an idea that was either brilliant or ridiculous, depending on your perspective. He wanted to weigh the human soul. His reasoning: if the soul exists and is a physical entity, it should have mass. And if it leaves the body at death, the body should weigh less after death than before. So he constructed a special bed on a sensitive scale, recruited 6 patients who were dying of tuberculosis, and measured their weight continuously through the moment of death. In one case, the first patient, he recorded a loss of 3/4 of an ounce at the moment of death, approximately 21 grams. In other cases, the results were less clear. Some showed no change, some showed changes at different times. McDougall's methodology was severely criticized. His sample size was tiny. His measurements were inconsistent. His controls were inadequate. The scientific community dismissed the study. But 21 grams entered the cultural consciousness, a number associated with the weight of the soul, repeated ever since, most famously in the 2003 film of the same name. Here's the honest assessment. McDougall's experiment was poorly designed and cannot be considered evidence of anything. But the impulse behind it, to treat the question of what leaves the body at death as a physical, measurable question, was not irrational. We just don't have the instruments. Because here's the thing: if consciousness is quantum information, as Penrose and Hameroff suggest, it doesn't have mass in the classical sense. It wouldn't register on a scale. The soul, if it exists, might not be the kind of thing you can weigh. McDougall was looking in the right direction, but with entirely the wrong tools. McDougall wasn't alone in trying to bring empirical methods to bear on the question of what, if anything, persists after death. The history of science has a surprisingly rich and mostly suppressed tradition of researchers attempting exactly this. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the Society for Psychical Research in Britain attracted some of the finest scientific minds of the era, including physicists, chemists, and Nobel laureates, who took seriously the question of whether consciousness could survive death. They conducted controlled experiments with mediums, documented cases of apparent communication from the deceased, and produced thousands of pages of careful, systematic research that mainstream science largely ignored. More recently, researchers have attempted to use sophisticated technology to detect something at the moment of death. Thermal imaging, electromagnetic measurements, high-sensitivity optical instruments. The AWARE study's use of specifically placed objects to test out-of-body perception. The results have been inconclusive, not because nothing was found, but because the signal, if it exists, is at the edge of or below our measurement capability. The problem is fundamental. We don't know what we're looking for. We don't have a theory of what consciousness is, physically speaking, that would tell us what instrument to build and what signature to look for. We're in the position of trying to detect radio waves before anyone knew radio waves existed. The detection requires not just better instruments but better concepts. And those concepts in this field are still being developed. Here's a pattern worth noticing. Every researcher who takes the scientific study of death and consciousness seriously faces serious professional risk. The field is stigmatized. Papers are harder to publish. Funding is harder to get. Colleagues are skeptical to the point of hostility. Why? Science is supposed to follow the evidence wherever it leads. So why has this particular domain been so resistant to serious investigation? Part of it is historical. The late 19th century was full of fraudulent mediums and spiritualist scams, and the scientific community developed a well-justified skepticism of anything smelling of the paranormal. That skepticism calcified into a cultural taboo that has proven very hard to shift. Part of it is methodological. The phenomena we're discussing are inherently difficult to study. They're rare, irreproducible in a laboratory setting, and subjective. Science has tools for studying objective, reproducible phenomena. The death experience doesn't fit neatly into those tools. And part of it, let's be honest, is that the implications of taking this seriously are deeply threatening to a certain worldview. If consciousness survives death, if past lives are real, if near-death experiences involve genuine perception of something beyond the physical, these findings would require a fundamental revision of our understanding of what mind is, what reality is, and what it means to be a human being. That's a lot to take on. But science's job is not to protect comfortable worldviews. Its job is to follow the evidence. And the evidence in this field, while far from conclusive, is far more interesting than the scientific mainstream has been willing to acknowledge. We touched on this in our multiverse theory video, but it deserves its full treatment here because it's directly relevant to the question of death. The quantum immortality argument derives from the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. If every quantum event generates a branching of reality, if every possible outcome of every quantum process actually occurs in some branch, then consider what happens at the moment of death. Death is a physical process. It involves quantum events, the specific cascade of molecular failures, the exact quantum states of neurons as they go dark, the precise biochemical processes that cannot be reversed. In the many worlds framework, at every point in that process where a quantum event could go differently, there is a branch where it does. In most branches, you die. The overwhelming majority of quantum outcomes lead to death. But in an infinitesimally small fraction of branches, something goes slightly differently. A biochemical process that should have failed doesn't. A quantum fluctuation that should be negligible isn't. And in that branch, you survive. From your first-person perspective, you can only experience the branch where you survive. You cannot experience death because experiencing requires a subject, and death removes the subject. So from your subjective point of view, you always find yourself in the branch where you made it through, no matter how close the call. This is quantum immortality. In the strongest version of the argument, your first-person subjective experience never ends. You always find yourself in the branch where you survived, regardless of how improbable that survival is. You grow arbitrarily old. You outlive everyone around you. You persist, increasingly alone, in increasingly improbable branches of reality. Most physicists are deeply skeptical of this argument's practical implications. The branching doesn't work cleanly enough. Decoherence is more complex than the simple version suggests, and there are serious questions about what constitutes a surviving you in a branch where your brain has been severely compromised. But as a thought experiment, quantum immortality reveals something important. In a many-worlds universe, the question, what happens after I die, may not have a single answer. It depends on which branch you're asking from. If you watched our simulation theory video, and if you didn't, go watch it after this, you'll remember the possibility that our universe is a computational simulation run by an advanced intelligence. In that framework, death takes on a very specific meaning. You are not a biological organism in a physical universe. You are a pattern of information in a simulation. And when you die, the question becomes, what happens to that pattern? In a simulation, information doesn't have to be deleted when a character dies. It can be stored, can be archived. It can be run in a different context, a different environment, a different simulation. The programmer, whatever or whoever that is, has options that don't exist in a purely physical universe. This maps surprisingly well onto various religious concepts of afterlife. Heaven could be a different simulation, optimized for the well-being of the conscious patterns stored within it. Reincarnation could be the reinstatement of a stored consciousness into a new instance. Purgatory could be a review state, a transitional computation before the next run begins. These are not spiritual claims. They're technical possibilities within the simulation framework. If we are information, our information doesn't have to end when this particular instance of our experience ends. Of course, none of this is guaranteed. The simulation might simply delete its characters when they die. The programmer might have no interest in preserving them. We have no way of knowing what the programmer's relationship to the beings inside the simulation is, indifferent, benevolent, or something else entirely. But the possibility exists. And in a simulation, unlike in a purely physical universe, death and permanent end of experience are not the same thing by definition. Let's pull all of these threads together and look at the most radical version of the picture they're painting. Multiple lines of inquiry, from quantum mechanics, from Lanz's biocentrism, from the hard problem of consciousness, from the verified near-death experiences, from the past life cases, all point in the same general direction. Consciousness might not be a product of matter. It might be something more fundamental. The physicist David Bohm proposed what he called the implicate order, a deeper level of reality from which both matter and consciousness emerge as manifestations. The philosopher David Chalmers argues that consciousness might be a fundamental feature of the universe, like mass or charge, not reducible to anything else, not explainable in purely physical terms. The physicist John Wheeler, who coined the term black hole, spent his later career arguing that the universe is fundamentally participatory, that it requires observers, that consciousness is baked into the structure of reality at the deepest level. If any of these views is correct, and none has been proven but none has been refuted either, then asking what happens to consciousness when the brain dies is like asking what happens to the ocean when a wave breaks. The wave was never separate from the ocean. Its apparent individuality was a temporary pattern in something that continues. Your consciousness, in this view, is a temporary pattern in the consciousness of the universe. The pattern changes. The pattern might even end as a recognizable individual pattern. But the underlying reality in which the pattern arose, that doesn't end. Can't. It's what everything is made of. Whether that is comforting or terrifying probably depends on how attached you are to being this specific pattern. Let's take stock. What does all of this actually add up to? The neuroscience tells us that dying is not the blank nothingness we might expect. There is a surge of organized brain activity at the moment of death, activity associated with conscious experience. Whatever the dying brain is doing in those final moments, it is not nothing. The near-death experience research tells us that a significant subset of people who come close to death report consistent, structured experiences, and that some of those experiences include verifiable perceptions of the external world that cannot be explained by hallucination. The quantum physics of consciousness raises the possibility that consciousness is information, and information at the quantum level cannot be destroyed. The pattern that is you might disperse, but it might not simply cease. The past life research presents cases that, in their best documented forms, include specific verified details that resist conventional explanation, and that point toward some form of continuity of memory or identity across physical deaths. None of this is proof of an afterlife. None of it tells us that the version of you sitting here right now will persist in a recognizable form after your death. The evidence is suggestive, not conclusive. The mechanisms are unknown. The implications are uncertain. But here is what the sum of this evidence does tell us. The materialist assumption that consciousness is simply a product of the brain, that death is simply the end of brain function, that there is nothing beyond the physical is not proven. It is an assumption, and the evidence we have is sufficient to challenge that assumption seriously. The honest answer to what happens after you die is, we don't know, but nothing is not a proven answer. It is a default assumption, and defaults can be wrong. Here's a genuinely uncomfortable possibility. The truth about what happens after death might be permanently beyond the reach of science as currently practiced. Science works by measuring the physical world. It uses instruments, experiments, data, and mathematical models to build an understanding of observable reality. It has been extraordinarily successful in this domain. But it has a fundamental limitation. It can only study what is physically detectable. If consciousness, or whatever persists after death, operates in a domain that doesn't interact with our physical instruments, science cannot detect it. Not because it isn't real, but because our methodology is limited to the physical. This is not a gap of the gods argument. It's not an invitation to fill the unknown with whatever religious or spiritual beliefs you prefer. It's a genuine epistemological point. The tools of empirical science are powerful but finite. There may be aspects of reality they cannot access. The philosopher Thomas Nagel, no mystic but one of the most rigorous analytical philosophers alive, has argued that consciousness represents exactly this kind of limit. That the subjective, first-person nature of experience is something that third-person, objective scientific methods are fundamentally unsuited to fully capture. That we may need new concepts, not just new data, to understand what mind actually is. If Nagel is right, then the question of what happens after death might require not just more research but a different kind of research, one that takes seriously the first-person perspective as data, not just as something to be explained away. We are not there yet. We may not get there for a long time. But acknowledging the limit is not the same as giving up. It's the beginning of knowing where to look next. And now we come to the part that actually matters. Because you're not going to walk away from this video with a definitive answer. Nobody can give you one. Not science, not religion, not philosophy. What you're going to walk away with is a choice about how to live with the uncertainty. One option is denial, Push the question back down, get back to your daily routine, and not think about it until you have to. This is the most popular option. It's understandable. The question is genuinely terrifying if you let yourself feel its full weight. Another option is to collapse into a prepackaged answer, to adopt whatever religious or secular framework gives you the most comfort and stop asking questions. This is also understandable. Certainty is comfortable. Uncertainty is not. But there's a third option, and it's the one that the evidence, imperfect, inconclusive, genuinely interesting, seems to suggest. Hold the question open. Stay curious. Take seriously the data that doesn't fit the conventional model. Resist the temptation to pretend we know more than we do, in either direction. Because here's what we do know. You are here right now. You are experiencing something complex and strange and irreplaceable, this specific moment, this specific awareness. Whether that awareness continues after your death, whether it has continued through previous deaths, whether it is ultimately indestructible, none of that changes what it is right now. And if the evidence points anywhere, it points toward this. Consciousness is stranger, more persistent, and more fundamental than we've been taught. The universe is not indifferent to the fact of experience. Experience might be what the universe, at its deepest level, actually is, which means that you, right now, reading this, aware of this moment, are not an accident. You are not a temporary glitch in an otherwise unconscious cosmos. You are the universe being aware of itself. And whatever happens next, that has happened, cannot be taken back. It is woven into whatever reality actually is. The question of what comes after is genuinely open. But what is happening right now, that's certain. Don't waste it.